Let's make a black walnut dye. Making herbal dyes are easy and a lot of fun to play around with. Black walnuts are one of the easiest plants to create a dye with. Black walnut dye is color fast and it needs no mordanting. You simply need to add water and a heat source. Be sure to wear old clothing and an apron when working with walnut dye, as it will stain anything it touches. To get started, you will need any natural fabric such as cotton, wool, silk, hemp, or linen. Off-white or light-colored natural materials will dye well too. You can also try darker colored clothing to give it a mottled brown cast to it. You will also need a basket full of black walnut hulls, and if you're doing the sun method, a glass jar, or a stainless steel pot or something similar if you're going to do it on the stove, as well as some water. If you're using the pot, you'll also need a heat source. To prepare your items for dyeing, wash them through a normal wash cycle if they are brand new. If they're used, pre-washing is usually not necessary. The first method for making dye is to put the black walnut hulls or leaves into a half-gallon or gallon jar and fill with water. Place the lid on the jar and set the jar in a sunny location. It normally takes about 5 to 7 days for the dye to develop in this way. The second method is quicker. You simply need to fill a stock pot half full with the walnut hulls or leaves. Then cover the walnut hulls with water so that they are completely submerged. Next, place it on your stove and simmer the pot for at least an hour. The longer you let it simmer and steep afterwards, the darker the color will get. So after 1 to 2 hours, turn off the heat and let the infusion cool. You can let it sit overnight for a darker dye. Once the solution has cooled, you'll want to remove the hulls from the pot to make space for your fabrics to be dyed. Let's talk a bit about colors. The green walnut hulls will give different colors than the black ones. The green ones will give a more golden brown appearance, while the black is more of a taupish brown. Leaves will often give a more olive drab green color. Now it's time to add the clothing. I am going to choose a white linen skirt, a blue cotton scarf, and a gray wool and nylon blend sweater. The sweater is over 70% wool and should dye fairly well. You can wet your fabrics in water first or add them in dry. I wet down the linen skirt and the cotton scarf, but left the wool sweater to dry, which I'll be adding to the pot later. So now I'm going to add my fabrics one at a time, making sure to push them down under the dye water. And then I'll place the pot back on the stove and turn it on and bring it back to a simmer. Let the dye bath simmer for about an hour to 2 hours, and then turn off the heat and let it sit and cool. Because excess agitation and temperature fluctuations can make wool shrink, I waited until I was done simmering the dye pot before I added the wool. Let the dye pot sit for several hours until it has become cool. Now it's time to rinse. Use tongs to remove the articles from the stock pot if you want to save the dye for a second round. If not, dump the entire pot into the sink. Run cool water over the items until the water runs clear. When your items are clear of any leftover dye, hang them on the line to dry. The color is set and can be washed with like-colored items. My items came out with a mottled effect, but if you don't like that striation in the dye, you can stir your pot frequently to avoid having the color settle more onto one part of the fabric than the other. Also, such as this blue scarf, sometimes it takes a couple of dye rounds to get the color to set darker.